Hello super friends and welcome to DC TV Talk, and in today's episode we are going to be discussing and breaking down a new interview from Stephen Amell himself that he recently had with IGN, so let's discuss. So yeah, Stephen Amell himself, of course, Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow, recently had an interview with IGN where he discussed loads of things about the upcoming season of Arrow and has revealed some quite interesting things that is definitely going to got my mind racing about this season, and I want to discuss them with you. So first off, Stephen starts talking about the season as a whole, and he says, and I quote, "Normally I have a really good overall view of the season. The interesting thing thus far this season is I've had a scene recently, and it was the first time that I had worked with a series regular in months, because Oliver's very isolated in prison obviously," he revealed when speaking to IGN. "The prison stuff is really gritty, and we beat Oliver down. There's one episode where I spend the entire episode in one room. That's it, and it was just 2 straight days of super interesting and intense stuff that I don't think we've really done on the show. We've never taken a character and isolated him and examined him psychologically the way we have this year with Oliver. So that sort of examination has been a really interesting exercise for me." So this is obviously focusing on the fact that they are really doubling down on Oliver being alone in prison. He is there by himself, he's alone, he hasn't really got anybody there with him, so he's literally there by himself. You know, it says, there's a really good quote there where he says, you know, it's the first time I had worked with a series regular in months. He doesn't say which one it is, but you know, he says, this is the first time I've basically worked with a main cast member, and that was really cool. So we know that he is really going to be isolated, he is really going to be by himself, you know, he's on his own, he's not going to have any kind of support, he's not going to have any major interactions with, you know, any of the major cast members. It's literally Oliver by himself, and I think that's great. The interview then goes on to talk about the villains who are going to be returning with Oliver in prison. He's in prison with a bunch of people that he basically put there, and I would say that Brick is kind of the ringleader of the group, but the things that Oliver discovers about some of the prisoners I think are a little bit unexpected for the first part of the season. And there are a couple of interesting employees in the prison, and there's also an inmate that I don't think Oliver ever thought he would see again. So this is very interesting. He's talking about, of course, Stardust and also Bronze Tiger and, of course, Brick. So he's saying that Brick is kind of the ringleader. He's the one who's kind of taking the charge with Bronze Tiger and also Stardust. So that's quite cool that they actually are making, you know, Brick the leader, which does kind of make sense when you think about it. But there's also going to be a couple of interesting employees in the prison, which I assume means that prison guard that was in the trailer, and maybe a couple others as well. But there is that prison guard who, you know, wakes him up in the trailer, and he's also stood in the back allowing all the prisoners to fight in the courtyard, so he's going to be a bit crooked, it seems. And there's also a prisoner who he never thought he would see again. So this is obviously that other villain who's going to be showing up this season that I mentioned in yesterday's video. Again, I don't know who this is going to be. I think it's interesting that he didn't think he'd ever see him again, which could add more fuel to the fire that it is Adrian Chase. I mean, I don't want to put, you know, all my faith in that theory, because as much as I want it to be true, I don't think it will be. But it does, you know, line up with that sentence. So who could it be that he never thought he'd see again? You know, it'd have to sort of be a thing where, you know, maybe they were dead. Like maybe, or he thought they were dead. Maybe he killed them, but then it turns out they didn't die. I don't know. I feel like that's a really interesting thing, but I'm definitely excited to see who that character turns out to be. He then goes on to talk about his new ally in prison, which is going by the name of Stanley, played by Brendan Fletcher. Stanley and Oliver have a relationship where, when he first gets in there, he seeks out Oliver for help and protection, and there's a very interesting scene where Brick and his whole crew use Stanley as leverage against Oliver, and especially in the first episode, it really illustrates how far Oliver's fallen and how he's had to cope with being in prison. So this new character who I mentioned in yesterday's video, his name is Stanley, and it seems like he's actually going to be asking Oliver to help him and protect him, whereas I thought Oliver was going to protect him generally. It seems like Stanley's actually asking for his help, and it seems like, you know, maybe Stanley is a bit of a, you know, maybe just a bit of a bullying victim in prison. You know, he looks to Oliver, who's kind of like one of the biggest guys in the yard, to protect him. So I think that's really interesting. That's a different twist than what I was expecting, and apparently they're going to try and use him as leverage, and it says that, you know, it's going to show how far Oliver's fallen, which I assume means that, you know, he's just not going to actually help Stanley. You know, that these new guys are going to try and threaten Stanley in order to get to Oliver, but Oliver's not going to react to it. He's going to keep his head down, as he says in the trailer. So I feel like that is what that is referring to. And it then goes on to talk about some of the fight scenes that we're going to be seeing, and the viewers don't know exactly how long that he's going to be in prison for, but it is of course a life sentence, which is very interesting. So it's strange that he's struggling a ton, but he's not trying to be the hero. But that doesn't mean we're going to be deprived of fight scenes. Even though he is going to spend a lot of time in prison, he's not going to be, there's not going to be devoid of any kind of fight scenes. Things have ramped up, in fact. We have a fight scene in the first episode that is actually dueling fight scenes, and it's one of our best stunt achievements, I think. It was, for me, almost 13 hours of just non-stop fighting, and it was amazing. And we couldn't use a stunt double for it. We've only had that a couple times in the history of the show, and I like to do a lot of my own stunts, but in this instance we physically could not have a double, and it was really something. Now, I feel like a lot of the action sequences when Oliver's in prison, they're not going to be able to use a double because Oliver isn't going to be in a suit. He is literally just Oliver Queen. So I don't think, that's a main reason why they can't use a stunt double as much, is because obviously Oliver's not in a suit. If he was in the Green Arrow suit, you can just stick anyone in there, really. But in this instance, it's just Oliver in the yard without any mask or hood or anything like that, so it has to really be Stephen Amell. And luckily, Stephen Amell, like he says, does like to do a lot of his own stunts, and he is very cooperative in that sense. Now, it is very interesting that he's saying that things have ramped up, so even though he's in prison, he's not going to be out fighting crime. There's actually still a lot of action inside of prison, so that's very exciting. He then goes on to discuss why Oliver doesn't just break himself out. Because while Oliver arguably has the skills to get himself out of prison, if he needs to, he's playing by the rules. One of the things that I chatted with the writers about is we have to make sure that there's an anchor to keep Oliver in prison. That's something that I've thought a lot about, because he's in there for 3 reasons. He's in there to keep Felicity and William safe, he's in there to give his friends immunity, and he's in there because that means that the FBI and Argus are going to track down Diaz. So if all 3 of those things go away, he would just break out, and that's something that we talk about all the time. So he's aware that Diaz is still out there, but he's also having trouble being convinced that Felicity and William are safe. He's having recurring nightmares about Diaz finding them and obviously what Diaz would do. So this kind of goes back to that, nightmare sequence that we saw in the trailer where we see Felicity and William in that jungle kind of environment where Diaz goes and shoots them. So that's, one of those nightmares that I theorized about a while ago. But obviously Oliver, he's trying to stay in prison because he's trying to keep them safe. They're in witness protection. He's also trying to make sure that, the rest of Team Arrow are immune as was promised. And also so the FBI and Argus can stay at their work and keep doing what they're doing in order to track down Diaz. But obviously he is worried that Diaz is still out there and he can track down Felicity and William at any time. And obviously we do see another shot in one of the other trailers, one of the Super Season trailers, where it looks like Diaz is actually in Felicity's new apartment, and we actually see her in a bit of a fight scene. And in a recent set photo, or a recent promo photo, we saw Felicity visiting Oliver in prison, and she's got a pretty bruised and cut up face, presumably after this fight with Diaz. So it seems like maybe Diaz really going after Felicity could be the thing that really pushes Oliver over the edge. Speaking of Felicity, I personally don't think that Oliver's seen Felicity since he's gone to prison because she's in witness protection, and that's sort of the main reason why Diggle is visiting on a regular basis, because he's updating them, how they're doing, are they safe, what's going on. But obviously Oliver and Felicity come face to face in the premiere, and Emily and I were joking about it because our last scene that we shot last year is the scene where I tell her that I'm going to prison and then I say goodbye to William. And then this scene in the premiere is sort of the same scene, insofar as it's really, really emotional, and Emily and I were laughing afterwards, like, can't we just have a scene where they are sitting around drinking coffee and talking about their day and not having these super emotional, tiring scenes. So obviously this is kind of just saying that when him and Felicity do meet up again for the first time since Oliver's been in prison, it's not going to be all happy. It's going to be pretty emotional and pretty tiring, which again is very reminiscent of the last time they saw each other when he was arrested. We then get a very interesting quote in regards to new Team Arrow and the rest of the members of Team Arrow. So they're trying to deal with Oliver's choice in their own ways. Diaz is off the board. He's been hiding for 5 months, but no one on the team is suiting up and doing the vigilante thing because obviously that would jeopardize what Oliver sacrificed for them. But we are introduced to a new vigilante crew, a new Green Arrow, and when Beth Schwartz, the showrunner, explained to me what the idea was, I was really excited because it was nothing I ever anticipated. So that's really interesting. I did not expect this at all. So it turns out there's going to be a new vigilante crew. This is a new team. There's just a random new team. So this is nothing to do with Team Arrow. This is a brand new team of vigilantes. And there's a new Green Arrow. And obviously many of us have speculated that this new Green Arrow that we saw in the trailer is what Roy Harper's going to be up to next season. But reading this makes me think that maybe it's not, which I think is very interesting. And again, who could these new crew members be? I've seen some people speculate that it could be the Longbow Hunters, but I don't really feel like that's true. I feel like that new Konami Rhodes character has got to be a part of this, surely. And then again, he's saying that none of Team Arrow are suiting up because it would jeopardize what Oliver sacrificed for them, which I never actually thought about it in that way. I never thought about the fact that, I kind of thought that they would have just continued on because Oliver asked them to. But then again, thinking about it, the FBI know who they all are. So if they started doing that, then, you know, that would be... You know, they had immunity for that mission to track down Diaz, but after Oliver gave himself up, you know, I guess they would be back on board again. So I think that's really interesting. It actually puts it into perspective a little bit, and this new Green Arrow crew is just very intriguing to me. He then goes on to discuss Roy Harper, saying that I can't give you a single thing. I can say stuff, but the real cool thing is that I could give you like 100 guesses and I don't think you would get it. We find him in a spot that you would never expect to find him, talking to a character that you've never seen before, but is incredibly familiar. Now, this is very mysterious. This whole thing regarding Roy Harper is so interesting to me because Roy is one of my favourite characters in the history of Arrow. I was so happy when it was announced he's coming back as a series regular next season. But this is so intriguing, you know, whether he's the Green Arrow or not. You know, it says we find him in a spot that you would never expect to find him, talking to a character you've never seen before but is incredibly familiar. What the hell does that mean? Like, that's just really mysterious. You know, talking to a character you've never seen before but is incredibly familiar? I just can't, you know, thinking about the characters that Roy is sort of related to and who he would know, who the hell is this character? Like, this is just really mysterious, and I like the fact they are keeping Roy much of a mystery because, you know, they haven't outright said he's the Green Arrow. They've not said, oh, he's coming back as Arsenal. So it's really strange that they are keeping this, you know, Roy Harper return shrouded in mystery, but I'm loving it. But this is an interesting quote, and I just can't work it out about who that character is. The synopsis for the new season also warns that Oliver will find himself vulnerable in a way unlike ever before when a mysterious new enemy begins to unravel his work as the Green Arrow, challenging him to redeem his name or risk losing everything. So this is Stephen Amell elaborating on that. So naturally he declined to elaborate on that tantalizing tease, only hinting that the final scene of the Season 7 premiere is a scene that really I don't think anybody will anticipate, and he thinks it's very, very, very exciting. So basically he's saying that at the end of Season 7 premiere we are going to get a big, you know, bomb drop, and he says that no one's going to see it coming, which is a recurring phrase that he keeps saying throughout this interview. It's very interesting that obviously Stephen Amell is very much keeping the cards close to his chest when it comes to Season 7, as is the entire crew. And it's very exciting in that fact because I like the fact that with Season 7 we're getting little tidbits dangled in front of us here and there, but they're not being explained. It's keeping us very much on edge for this season, which is very good. But, you know, there's just a lot we need to find out about this season, and while we got some really interesting stuff in that interview, there's still so much we need to learn. But what do you guys think about Stephen's comments? Make sure you tell me all your thoughts about him in the comment section down below, and are you excited about Arrow in Season 7? So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like, it'll help me out a lot, and share this video with anyone and everyone you know who loves DC TV and get them to join the community. And as always guys, please subscribe for your latest content on Supergirl, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Arrow and Black Lightning. And with all that said guys, I hope to see you again in my next video.